here with all of us. That's ourrev.us/Zoom. Let's see a few more names. We've got Leona from rural Kempner, Texas. Welcome from Texas. Ken from Silver Spring, Maryland. Richard from North Idaho. Folks from all over the country tuning in. Carol from La Crescenta, California. Welcome, everybody. And with that, let me hand this over to our host for the evening, Our Revolution Executive Director, Joseph Gevarghese. Joseph.
Thank you, Amanda Nichols. Amanda is the editor of the Revolution Report, which is our national progressive newsletter. It hits email inboxes every Saturday. If you don't get it, you should. It's must-read news. So that's, again, Amanda Nichols, the editor of the Revolution Report. If you want to get it, you can sign up to join Our Revolution as a member. Links will be dropped in the chat. Good evening, brothers and sisters. My name is Joseph Gevarghese. I'm the executive director of Our Revolution, and this is our national 2023 Organize to Win kickoff. I want to welcome all of you, especially our members, the people put in your time, your treasure, to support transforming this country. Thank you for joining us and for this 2023 kickoff. As we talk about our work ahead, it's important to stay grounded in our values. Our revolution was founded by Bernie Sanders 6 years ago to build a powerful progressive movement in the United States. And we are succeeding. Change doesn't happen overnight, but man, a lot of change has happened since Bernie first ran for president in 2016. And that's our mission, to build out the progressive movement. And today we're America's largest grassroots funded political and independent political organization. And we lean into Bernie's mission by doing four things. We organize the grassroots because change happens from the bottom up. And we organize people to elect progressive champions at every level of government to fight for progressive issues all across the United States, and to transform the Democratic Party and make it a more progressive party. Tonight, we are going to recap all of our work to execute our 4-point plan over the course of 2022. And we're going to talk about our plan to advance the political revolution this year in 2023. And before we get started, I want to invite all of you to join us on this journey. Help make 2023 the year that we advance the political revolution. Become a member of our revolution, support us financially, but you can also get involved. You're going to be seeing a series of links on ways you can get involved in fighting for progressive issues, fighting to transform the Democratic Party, and fighting to organize the grassroots. Paco, over to you, brother.
Thanks, Joseph. So let's start with the first plank that Joseph described of our organizing model, right? And that's electing progressive champions. So here are the top lines, right? In 2022, we got progressives to the polls and helped Democrats stave off a red wave of radical Republicans. Our Revolution volunteers made over 5.4 million voter contacts. That's awesome. Thank you to all of you that participated, that phone called. And what we did there was we flipped a Senate seat in Pennsylvania with progressive populist John Fetterman winning. And we also helped the Democrats keep control of the Senate by re-electing Raphael Warnock in the Georgia runoff. And on the House side, we got 9 new progressives across the finish line, including Greg Casar, who's going to join us in a little bit. And we'll hear what he's got to say about being a new member of Congress. And we now have the biggest progressive voting bloc in Congress ever. And Greg is going to talk a little bit about how we can wield that progressive power. Joseph, back to you.
So thanks, Paco. Looking ahead, right? Our revolution is going to be preparing for 2024, right? We're going to be preparing to take out corporate Democrats like Kristen Sinema, and we're going to get ready to win back the U.S. House. But unlike a lot of other organizations, we're not skipping this year. We're not skipping the critical elections that are happening in 2023. This year, mayors and city councilors are going to be running for re-election, are going to be running to take over the biggest cities in the United States of America, from Chicago to New York to Philly to Nashville, all across the United States. Hundreds of progressives are going to be running for office. And these down ballot races are critical because they are the testing grounds for future progressive champions. Remember, Bernie Sanders started off as a mayor. The cities are also important because they are laboratories of policy experimentation. Stuff that we want to see happen at the federal level starts local. And look no further than what our movement has done in St. Louis. We helped elect Megan Green as the president of the board of Aldermen, and she helped usher in a brand new piece of legislation that guarantees basic income. It's a pilot program, but it guarantees basic income. We're doing that in St. Louis, Missouri, in the heartland. Megan, who's on the ballot again in just a few months, is here tonight to talk about organizing for real, meaningful change. And I want to invite all of you who are interested in helping us elect progressive champions around the United States this year in different cities to sign up for our Elect Progressives team. Link is in the chat. Paco, over to you, brother.
Thanks, Joseph. So that brings us to the next plank of our organizing strategy, right? These go hand in hand. We elect progressive champions. They help push legislation on the inside. We help push for it on the outside. And that's fighting for progressive policies, right? In 2022, we helped get meaningful steps on climate, on drug pricing, and more through the legislative process at the federal level. But unfortunately, and let's be real, right? With the House now in Republican control, not much is going to happen in Congress this year. Last year, President Biden used executive action to expunge federal marijuana convictions, to enact gun safety measures, and to try and pass student debt relief. And he could do much more this year. That's why we'll be organizing to pressure Biden to use the power of the pen to pass paid sick leave for rail workers, ensure union rights for federal contractors, close tax loopholes for the wealthy, among other things, right? So you can join our federal action team to help create the strategy and build pressure to ensure President Biden is held accountable and he delivers for American families in 2023. That link is getting dropped in the chat now. And as Joseph mentioned, state and local jurisdictions are laboratories of experimentation where policies, if successful at the state and local level, can be pushed up to the federal level, right? And in just a bit, we'll be talking to One Fair Wage President Saru Jayaraman about the launch of our campaigns to raise the wage and eliminate tipped wages through ballot measures in Ohio, in Arizona, Maryland, Illinois, New York, and other states. So if you guys are there, and if you're not, you can join the Raise the Wage team in the link that's getting dropped right now, and you can help us win higher wages, eliminate the tip wage, and help our fellow workers do better, because we all do better when we all do better. Joseph, back to you.
Thanks, Paco. And a third plank of our organizing vision is to transform the Democratic Party and make it a more progressive party. The Democratic Party functions as a gatekeeper to the reins of power. And if we want to make the Democratic Party progressive, if we want to make our government progressive, we got to start with the grassroots. In 2022, our revolution has helped organize progressive Democratic Party officials in 20 plus states and at the DNC. We're going to continue building on that organization this year, where control of state parties is up for grabs. in places like Arizona, Nevada, Washington State, and even California. In fact, California Democratic Party Progressive Caucus Chair Amr Shergill is with us tonight to talk about the vote that is happening now to elect more progressives to run the Democratic Party there. With that, I want to invite everyone, whether you're in California or around the country, to get involved in our Transform the Party committee. We have a chance to make sure the Democratic Party goes in a progressive direction. If you're a party officer at a local level, sign up for our party transformation team. If you are somebody who wants to get involved in your local Democratic Party, sign up. Link is in the chat.
So Joseph, who's going to be our first guest this evening?
So with that, I want to bring up a very special friend of Our Revolution. He is an Our Revolution member, and he is the newest U.S. representative from the Lone Star State. His name is Greg Casar. Greg was just sworn in after a little bit of delay, and he was also just elected the whip of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. That means that Greg is going to be one of our movement's strategic partners in 2023. Greg, welcome. Tell us a little bit about how your first week in Congress has been, brother.
Hey, everybody. It's a little cold out here, not quite Texas, but my heart is warmed up to be with my Our Revolution family. The first week in Congress had us delayed getting sworn in for the first time in 100 years. And it took longer to swear in members for the first time since before the Civil War. And that was driven by the extreme right wing of the party continuing to fight with the other almost quite as extreme right wing of the Republican Party to essentially shut the Congress down. And I didn't mind too much not getting sworn in. We knew that would happen eventually. But what it foretells is that we know in Congress, the next 2 years, these same people that boosted the insurrection, denied election results, are going to be willing to shut down the Congress over things like not passing the budget, not paying our bills, forcing cuts to Social Security and Medicare. And so it shows how important it will be for the grassroots to be activated and for the progressive parts of our party to not allow some kind of deal that balances the budget on the backs of the poor, the sick, our seniors, and struggling everyday people. And that's going to be our job, while we also set out a positive vision for, if we retake the House, how Democrats can actually deliver for working people. And that's going to be a part of the message that we need to build alongside the movement, not just in the halls of power, but out in our communities with organizations like y'all's.
Greg, and thank you for being out in the cold and talking to our leaders from around the country. So a little bit about the Republican threat. It seems like there's a small group of representatives who are holding Congress hostage, and you're signaling that they are a greater threat to a lot of our progressive priorities. What do we need to do as a movement to get ready to fight with allies in the CPC as organizers on the outside?
We need to use this moment to show that their top priorities are really to redistribute money from working people to big corporations, because they had this big fight and they're trying to seem like populists. But the first bill I just voted no on in the House was, they called it defunding the IRS, but really what it was trying to do was take away auditing capacity and take away the ability for us to actually redistribute and actually look into tax cheats so that we can fund the vital programs working class people need. So we see them, whether they're in them, never McCarthy people and McCarthy people, talking about the border, fear-mongering about people of color, fear-mongering about immigrants, talking about CRT. They do all this stuff. But at the end of the day, both ends of that party are committed to making sure that mega corporations, the people that fund the Republicans, can get away with tax cheating. And then what we also have to do, as y'all are talking about, is make sure the Democratic Party is fully on the other side of the ledger. And that's the organizing work we get to do these 2 years, so we can have that stark contrast and build the kind of Democratic majority that does things like pass the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, and restore abortion rights and actually push forward union rights. That used to be stuff that came from places like Texas. LBJ signed all those bills, but people like LBJ and FDR famously said, make me do it. And that's part of the work we can do these next 2 years so that we can defend democracy and defend people from the worst Republican excesses, but then actually deliver in 2 years and inspire hope and create that virtuous cycle of more organizing.
You know, Greg, what you said about both FDR and LBJ are critical teaching points for our movement. They're learning points, right? Because it was in those moments when we had people in the streets making a set of demands on a group of elected officials who we knew that they were responsive to us, but we had to push them and give them the rationale to say, you know what, we need to make sure everyone has the right to organize. We need to make sure everyone has living wages and health care. That is the model that we are committed to restoring, inside and outside organizing. And I just want to underscore that. So we're excited to be working with you, Whip Casar. Also want to point out, you talked about the threat from the radical right wing, and our mission in this moment is to hold up who they are, right? They're trying to make the rich richer and then present an alternative vision of ourselves, right? This is what we will fight for, whether it's fair housing, living wages. As a part of that strategy, right? I mean, although the Democrats are in the minority right now in the House, how can we make some progress with President Biden on these issues? Because, you know, executive action often precedes legislative action, right? Sometimes people in the streets got LBJ to sign an executive order before Congress passed civil rights legislation, for example. So what
That's
should we
exactly
get
right.
to do?
And this is the last bit that I can pass along to y'all, because then I actually do have to go vote against more bad stuff right here in the building behind me. But we should work and push and work with the White House to get things done. And that will take sometimes us applauding things when we get 70 or 80% of what we want. Doesn't mean we should take 7%. But for example, the White House recently cleared the path for people to more easily get abortion medication at pharmacies and to legally use the U.S. Postal Service to mail it from places like Washington, D.C. to Texas. That is laudable. That's him chipping away at that abortion ban. And we know abortion rights are also workers' rights and are a populist, important issue and a life or death issue for people. And it impacts people's pocketbooks. So we should, one day we can applaud that, herald that, and ask for more. And the next day, you know, talk about some of the immigration enforcement things that I disagree with. But we need to be comfortable with doing both, where we can applaud the good and incentivize that, and then also push back on the bad. That's how we should be as a movement. That's when we get to a powerful, mature movement, is where we can kind of hold all of those truths, keep working on executive action. And I know our revolution will be so focused on local races. That's so important, because those local champions could eventually be the members of Congress. Those bills that they passed, we passed tenants' rights protections on the Austin City Council as one of the last things I did. Now we're talking about a federal bill to put those sorts of same protections, those rights to organize for tenants all over the country. I also think we are in such a workers' rights moment. And so organizing your workplaces, supporting with striking workers, that is a way that we can close the gap in inequality and build political power, no matter who the Speaker of the House is. We need the White House and the administration to protect those workers, to enforce existing laws against union busting employers, and building that union movement, no matter who's in charge, also changes this country. And so just keep on organizing. Let's keep in touch. Follow my social on the campaign side. It's at Greg Casar. If you need to follow federal things, it's at Rep Casar. Let's keep in touch. And thank you guys so much for what y'all are doing.
So Greg Casar, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're going to be there on the front lines with you and the rest of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. So this year, brothers and sisters, I want to invite all of you to sign up for our federal action team. This is the team that's going to work with our progressive allies in Congress to make sure that we fight back against the right-wing extremism, but we also push the president to do the right thing by getting paid sick leave for all rail workers, by making sure that corporations are accountable for price gouging and wage theft, taking executive action to stop fossil fuel recording on federal lands. 2023 is a year we can push the executive branch in a much more progressive direction before 2024. And if you want to get involved in our movement, sign up to be part of the federal action team. Link is in the chat.
Thanks, Joseph. And thanks, Greg, too, for some awesome remarks. It's great to have somebody that was at the city council level and then rose up to the federal level, continue to fight for the things he's fighting on. And it's my pleasure now to introduce yet another returning guest to our little show we got going here, Megan Green, a former Bernie delegate who we are proud to support for St. Louis Board of Aldermen in the last election, and who our members really threw down for and helped elect to president of the board this past November. So with Megan, we beat big money with big developers in St. Louis who didn't want a progressive leader on the board, or a progressive majority for that matter, right? So please put your questions for Megan in the Q&A section here in Zoom, and give some love with your emojis to Megan Green. Megan, thank you for being here tonight. I hear you and your progressive bloc in the St. Louis Board of Aldermen are hitting the ground running, already started with passing a guaranteed basic income pilot program. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. We got off to a running start. We knew the votes would be pretty close, but we're able to get it across the finish line to start a pilot program of $500 a month for about 450 to 500 families of kids in public school within the city of St. Louis. And that pilot program will go on for 18 months. We will be one of 20 cities and growing across the United States that is piloting a basic income program. And the hope, as Representative Casar said in the last segment, is a lot of these policies, they start locally, right? So if we can get a basic income pilot going in St. Louis and in dozens of cities across this country, the hope is that eventually that pushes our federal and state policy to a place where we are seeing basic income policies happening at higher levels of government.
Right, and that success certainly shows the effectiveness of progressives in governing positions, right, and delivering as soon as we take power and have majorities. Can you explain a little bit about how these local achievements could potentially be exported around the country?
I mean, in my point of view, it comes from coalition building, right? You know, it wasn't just about getting a different president elected to president of the board. That was a piece of it. But it also goes back to building coalitions with racial justice organizations, with unions, with St. Louis public schools, who our public schools have about 5,000 kids that are considered homeless on any given year. And so we know that something as simple as a basic income, $500 a month, can make the difference between a kid having a place to stay and sleep at night, going to school with food in their stomach in the morning, versus not. And so I think what folks can learn from us in St. Louis is, if you build those coalitions across different types of organizations and across different spectrums of elected officials, you can get this work done.
That's right. And so talking about, you know, building these coalitions, right? You in St. Louis, right, in the Board of Aldermen, you know, there were, I think at the beginning, maybe a couple of candidates that were considered quote unquote progressive got elected, then a few more. All of a sudden you have a majority, right? Can you talk a little bit about how all that happened? It might be a little bit instructive to some of our members who are watching from other cities that are, you know, on the cusp of potentially doing a progressive takeover of their local governments as well.
No, I think the credit in St. Louis has to go back to the start of the Ferguson uprising, right? When Mike Brown was murdered, it brought thousands of people to the streets in St. Louis. And from that moment on, the organizing never stopped. And those groups of folks who were out protesting the murder of Mike Brown were also people who were involved with the Fight for 15. One of our state reps, Rasheen Aldrich, who is also now running to be on the Board of Aldermen, he came up through the Fight for 15 and was a worker at Jimmy John's and a protest leader through the Ferguson Uprising, and then has moved from protest into politics. And along the way, we've brought these racial justice coalitions, these economic justice coalitions, these immigrant rights coalitions all together so that we can be moving in one direction. But there's another thing that's coming up in St. Louis that is quite interesting. And that is, in this next round of elections we have this spring, the Board of Aldermen is actually shrinking from 28 wards down to 14 wards. And in doing that, it gives us an opportunity to put a pressure on the system, to change the system in a way that we can make sure that we are getting the rules in place for the Board of Aldermen that will allow for more progressive policy to get passed through. And it also will make sure that we can get progressives elected to the majority of slots in those new districts, in those new wards, so that we can grow on the momentum that we've already created, not just through my election, but through the election of Congresswoman Cori Bush and through Mayor Tashara Jones, who are all part of this coalition that has just been continuing to build since the Ferguson Uprising in 2014.
Yeah, and I do remember, you talked about how folks in the Fight for 15 were very involved. I do remember the McDonald's in Ferguson being sort of a hub / like safe space for people to be able to run into if something was going on the streets, or a place for them to organize. It was really powerful to see all these different what many consider sort of separate fights really joining in, because they're really all the same fight, right?
Right. Racial justice is economic justice.
Absolutely.
We have to keep them connected.
That's right. And so it looks like, the filing deadline for your election, because you won a special election, right, last time around?
Correct. Yes.
The filing for your election, the filing date passed, and it looks like you're now running unopposed, right, which is great. You did mention, though, that, the Board of Aldermen is shrinking basically in half, right?
Yes.
What's going to be done, or what can be done to maintain that progressive majority with this new map that's coming up in March?
I mean, we're going to have to continue the organizing. So from my vantage point, while I don't personally have an opponent, I also have a responsibility to continue to do that work to make sure that we have the governing coalition that we need at the Board of Aldermen, because our work isn't done, right? We're still working on tax incentive reform. We're still working on labor peace agreements. We are still working on a tenants bill of rights and a homeless bill of rights, and all these things that are contingent upon maintaining that progressive majority under this smaller Board of Aldermen. And so from here on out, we have the primary in March and then the runoff in April. And so there will be a handful of candidates that myself and a number of organizations are getting behind to knock those doors, make those phone calls, have those conversations, pound the pavement in the way that we need to pound it, to make sure that we have that coalition and that governing majority that we need come April.
Well, that's awesome. And Megan, we look forward to working with you guys in St. Louis to make sure we continue to maintain that progressive majority and perhaps even expand it a little bit more. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. And so folks that are here in the Zoom with us, we hope you'll sign up now to be part of our Elect Progressives team. We're dropping that link in the chat right now. You heard from Megan, right? They hit the ground running right away with the Board of Aldermen, and we're able to pass a basic income pilot program, which is amazing. We of course will welcome your input as part of this team, as we make endorsements and work to elect mayors, city councilors, state house seats, and more in the year to come. Even if there's no election in your area, which I know there's not enough here for some folks, your participation on this team is very, very valuable. You can make an impact from anywhere to help build progressive power in different parts of the country. So let me now turn it back to Joseph to introduce our next guest. Joseph, take it away.
Thanks, Paco. And again, I want to encourage everyone who is listening to do more than listen, take action, get involved, sign up. If you're interested in helping elect more progressive champions like Megan Green and Greg Casar, join our Elect Progressives team. If you're interested in pushing for progressive policy at the federal level, sign up for our federal action team. Those links are in the chat. And now I want to invite you to get involved in another fight that is critical to advancing our revolution, and that is the fight to win living wages for all American workers. And here to talk about that is Saru Jayaraman. She is the president of One Fair Wage, and she has been on the cutting edge of leading the fight to raise the minimum wage and to eliminate the tipped minimum wage, which is a legacy of slavery. She's been on the cutting edge of fighting for this issue over the past several years. Going forward in 2023, our revolution is going to be working with Saru and the activists at One Fair Wage to push legislation to raise wages in different state houses like New York, like Maryland. We're also going to put ballot measures on the ballot, gather signatures this year to put measures on the ballot in places like Ohio and Arizona in 2024. So here to tell us a little bit about the campaign, and more importantly, to talk about how we can get involved in the fight as our revolution, is Saru herself. Saru, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. And sorry, I'm sitting in my car. I'm here picking up my kids, but really, really excited to be with all of you.
Well, it has been so awesome working with you. And I think in the last several months, you've been on from coast to coast. You're a nonstop organizer, and it's like fitting that you're in your car on the go. So, sister, tell us a little bit about the tipped minimum wage and the history behind why we have this tiered wage system in the United States.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful to have this opportunity because we are in a really, really historic moment where for the first time really since emancipation, when this wage structure was created, which I'm about to explain, millions of workers are refusing to work for these wages. So look, the restaurant industry has been one of the largest and fastest growing private sector employers in the United States for decades. It hit 14 million workers pre-pandemic. That was 1 in 10 American workers, but it's been the absolute lowest paying employer in the United States for generations, dating back to emancipation, when the restaurant industry first demanded the right to hire newly freed slaves, not pay them anything, and have them live on this new idea that had just come from Europe at the time called tipping. You know, before emancipation, waiters in the US were mostly white men, and they didn't get tips. They actually got a full wage from their boss. Tipping was not prevalent. At emancipation was right around the time tipping came to the US from Europe, and the restaurant industry saw it as an opportunity to basically continue slavery and hire Black people for free. And so they actually mutated tipping at that time from being an extra bonus as it had always been to becoming a replacement for wages. That was 1865. Well, about 50 years later, in 1919, the restaurants that created that idea came together and formed an entity called the National Restaurant Association. We call it the other NRA. There are state chapters in every state: Illinois State Restaurant Association, Massachusetts Restaurant Association. And why this is so important to uplift is that this entity has been around for 100 years, since 1919, lobbying to maintain this wage that was created expressly, intently to deny Black workers a wage. And that idea that Black workers could get nothing was made law in 1938 as part of the New Deal, when everybody got the right to the federal minimum wage for the first time. But millions of Black workers, in particular tipped workers, were excluded and told you get nothing as long as you get tips. And we went from zero in 1938 all the way up to $2.13 an hour today, the current federal minimum wage for tipped workers. Today, overwhelmingly, these workers are women. It's disproportionately women, still disproportionately women of color, overwhelmingly single moms, struggling with the highest rates of both poverty and sexual harassment of any industry in the United States. And that was all pre-pandemic. Look, with the pandemic, it's just become unlivable, truly.
And so this moment seems ripe to move this issue going into another electoral system. Greg Casar was on earlier, and he said it was incumbent on us as organizers to highlight Republican hypocrisy. They're the party of the rich. We've got to be the party of the working class. And the campaign that we're working together on is really designed to highlight that by winning wage increases and putting ballot measures on the ballot in different states that are critical. So tell us a little bit about the roadmap for change. And as a part of that, you've got some breaking news you want to at least tell us a little bit about.
Yes.
That's going to, I think, help create some fuel for the fire that we are going to start and to transform the restaurant industry.
That's right. So first, I want to say that I mentioned the formation of the National Restaurant Association. We call it the other NRA, which was formed in 1919. And so sadly, I do have to say, the reason this issue has been so hard to win, why is it still $2.13 at the federal level and, $3, $4, $5 in multiple states, is because this restaurant association, the other NRA, has unfortunately won over legislators of both parties, so Democrats included, and many even progressive Democrats that have rolled over to the whims and power of the restaurant association. But finally, things are changing. It's been such a hard fight. The Restaurant Association has wielded so much power over both parties. But with the pandemic, everything changed. Millions of workers decided enough is enough. Tips went way down because sales went down. Harassment went way up. We heard from so many women. I'm regularly asked, take off your mask so I can see how cute you are before I decide how much to tip you. And that changed everything. Workers reached their breaking point. 1.2 million workers left the industry. Millions more are leaving. And in response, thousands of restaurants are raising wages to recruit staff. So we have a historic moment where the opposition has decreased. And as a result, we're winning. Big news, 2022, we won a full minimum wage with tips on top for workers in Michigan. Michigan just became the 8th state to end the sub-minimum wage for tipped workers. And in November, as I saw was in the chat, we had a huge victory in DC, really historic victory. We raised the wage. 76% of voters voted to raise the wage from $5 an hour to $16.75. And so we are on a roll. We have introduced this in 10 states for this year. It's moving in New York, Maryland, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Vermont, Colorado. And in California, we're moving a bill to end the sub-minimum wage for incarcerated workers as well. And so we'd love to work with all of you on these states this year. But as you mentioned, even beyond this year, we are collecting signatures right now to put this on the ballot in 2024 in Arizona, Ohio, and Michigan, all 3 places where putting this raising wages on the ballot is going to not only raise wages for at least 1 million workers in each of those states, but also mobilize hundreds of thousands of people to vote with us on our values. So we'd love to work with you. This is our year. We just won in DC and Michigan. We have to get these Democrats to do the right thing and listen to workers rather than the National Restaurant Association. And we do have some breaking news, like you said. There is going to be some big news coming out in the next couple of weeks that the Restaurant Association has been engaged in a very nefarious plot. All of these years of lobbying against workers' wages, turns out that money hasn't come from member corporations. It's coming directly from low-wage workers themselves. So keep an eye out for that horrific news. We need your help to tell Democrats enough is enough, time to stand up to the Restaurant Association and do the right thing.
So, Saru, amazing work. I want to let all of our leaders know you can get involved in this fight. We can keep building on the progress. that workers are already making around the fight for fair wages, you can join our Raise a Wage team. We're going to be partnering with One Fair Wage to fight state by state to make sure that no worker is left behind. That is our mission. And, at the end of the day, this is critical for us as a movement to hold up. This is our top value, which is raising the standard of living for American workers. If we can prove that and sell that to the American people, I think we will win elections, right? And that's what we need to do to help transform this country. We have a moment to organize. Join the Raise the Wage team. Sign up, link is in the chat, and we're going to be working with Saru and activists all across the country to get this done. Also, if you happen to work in the restaurant industry, and if you happen to make a tip minimum wage, we'd love to have you involved in this campaign. If you're willing to speak up and be public, we've got your back. So again, sign up for our organizing committee. And Saru, thank you so much for joining us tonight as you're taking care of your family.
Thank you so much, all of you. Looking forward to working together.
Thank you, Saru, and thank you, Joseph. Very inspiring conversation, and something that we're all pumped up about going into 2023. So speaking of being pumped up, now I'm very happy to introduce Amar Shergill. He's the chair of the Progressive Caucus at the California Democratic Party. And Amar might have some, we talked a little bit about breaking news regarding the other NRA, the National Restaurant Association, but Amar might have some breaking news for us as well. So if you have any questions for him, put them in the Q&A in Zoom. So Amar, welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight. Tell us a little bit about what's going on in California and about this little bit of breaking news you got for us.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on. It's always great to be with Our Revolution, and you guys always want, leading edge stuff. So we got a brand new congressperson, we got breaking news from Saru, and I thought I was just only going to break news for California, but here's what I see come across the wire, is that it's not just about, the victories in California. We want reform in Democratic parties around the country, and we've been working with allies. In Nevada, we've had great success, and I just saw that in Florida, the state party chair has resigned, in large part because immediately after the election, the progressives there stood up and said, look, we've become irrelevant statewide. We've got to change. And now we see what that pressure has brought. The state party chair has resigned. And we've seen in New York, we lost congressional seats for no good reason. And it's progressives that are leading the way. And folks like Our Revolution doing this around the country. So it's always good to be with Our Revolution. So we're building those coalitions to get the work done. But let's talk about California a little bit. What we do every couple of years in California is that we elect delegates to the state party, the largest state party in the country. I happen to be chair of the largest caucus or subgroup within the California Democratic Party. And those delegates, what they do is they vote on endorsements. So when we talk about the Democratic Party brand in California, it's pretty strong. So if you like folks like Ro Khanna, if you like Katie Porter, if you like Barbara Lee, those folks are elected because the party endorsed them. Those endorsements come because delegates win their local elections, and we're in one of those cycles right now. And one of the most important things about this cycle right now is that we know Feinstein is not coming back. She cannot win the next senatorial election. So we're going to be replacing her. And it's going to be a progressive. It's going to be Barbara Lee. It's going to be Ro Khanna. It's going to be Katie Porter. And we've got to block Adam Schiff, right? That's just not an option for California. So in order to do that, we have to elect delegates statewide that will go into the party and endorse a progressive and send that progressive to Washington. So you'll see in the chat right now, there's a link, pdn.vote. And that gives you all the information about the elections happening in California. And we've been blessed that Our Revolution has been so supportive in getting their folks activated. But here's what I know. California is a big state. A lot of folks around the country know people in California. If you live in California, if you know somebody that lives in California, if you know how to spell California, find voters in our state. Give them this link, pdn.vote. We'll give them all the information on the 21st and 22nd. We have a lot of delegate races happening. People need to show up in person and vote. And if we do that, we'll elect the kind of folks that we need. And look, here's a bit of breaking news. We've been really successful over the last few years, leading off of the Bernie campaign success and winning the California primary for Bernie. We've been also bringing that into our delegate elections and winning them. But what that means is that there's been a pushback. And what we found recently is there's a AstroTurf website put up to compete with our website saying, hey, we're the great Democrats. We have no described values, but vote for these Democrats. And that's fine. We'll fight and we'll compete head to head with whoever we want. But here's what we found out, and this is the breaking news, is that website was set up by the chair of the California Democratic Party, Rusty Hicks. And how do we know that? Because this anonymous website used a Google form, and that Google form down at the bottom said made from Rusty Hicks' own personal account. So the guy that's in charge of administering the election for delegates, that's supposed to be neutral, is behind the scenes hiding his own astroturfing, behind the scenes hiding his attempt to put his thumb on the scales and change the election. And what happened when we found out? He deleted all evidence of his involvement, right? If this was no problem, he would have put his name at the top of the website. If this was no problem, he would have left his Google form ID out there. But he knows it's a problem. And what I'm here to talk about is that we need your help to lean into this election. If he's putting those kind of resources in, a guy that has taken millions of dollars for the California Democratic Party to block CalCare, a guy that has taken almost $500,000 from fossil fuel corporations so they can elect fossil fuel Democrats. A guy like that has resources, and we need you all to lean in at pdn.vote. Find your Californians, get them to vote, and then we'll get another progressive to the U.S. Senate.
Right. So talk a little bit, you mentioned a little bit about Florida, right? This kind of stuff is happening all over all over the country and all kinds of different states this year, right? So California has a progressive caucus within the Democratic Party, right? What's going on in other places around the country?
Yeah, we're lucky that the Progressive Caucus, we have these connections and we keep in touch, and we have our own Zooms with other progressives around the country. And what we see happening here in California is happening elsewhere, is that as progressive power builds, we see the obvious and rational reaction from corporate Democrats where they try to hold on to power with whatever nefarious behind the scenes, whether it's money or it's bylaw manipulation, or whatever they can get their hands on. So California, I've just described a good example for you. We've seen that in many progressive caucus experiences around the state where they are building power, and then there's a response to building power. So the message to all our folks around the country is to recognize that when you see the pushback, when it seems like, hey, this is a tougher fight than we thought, that's actually the greatest indication of your success. When they push back hard, it means you're working and you're winning. So just lean into those local fights when you see the pushback.
Yeah, and look, I mean, we'll talk about this in a little bit, right? But there's progressive caucuses being formed, and well, Nevada already has one, right? Florida, as you mentioned, was working on strengthening theirs. It's happening all over the country, and that's why it's so important for our members to get involved, right? Why do you think, Amar, it's so important for grassroots folks to get involved in their local parties? You mentioned a little bit about corporate domination, but how can we push back on them?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Is that, look, as much as a lot of us don't like the things that the Democratic Party does, the Democratic Party brand is still strong, and it helps elect a lot of folks. So when you get involved grassroots, you help decide who the Democratic Party puts its name and brand behind. And we've seen that by strong organizing, grassroots, you get folks like Greg Casar, right? A few years ago, that wasn't possible. Now it is. And we see so many more folks like that around the state that are endorsed and helped by the party to get elected because the party is responding to really strong grassroots organizing. And that's what our revolution is so good at. That's what the Zoom is about. That's what this type of organizing is really effective in.
Well, thank you, Amr, for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it. Again, folks, if you have friends in California, or if you're in California yourself, go to pdn.vote, V-O-T-E. That's P as in Paul, D as in Democrat, N as in no, .vote. And have them participate in the ADEMS that is happening in California until, you said January 21st, is that right?
Yeah, 21st and 22nd are when the next batch of elections happen, but really go there now. You'll find out where the votes are. You'll see a list of great endorsed candidates all around the state that you can check in with, do your research on, and then get organized for those 2 days.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Amr, for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. And hope, Rusty has some problems to deal with here in the near future. So really appreciate you joining us. And for folks here in the Zoom, you can join our party transformation team, right? That link is getting dropped in the chat right now. You can help us create a more progressive and democratic party starting at the state and local level. Again, this is important, not just in California, as we heard about, but in your state and your local party organizations as well. This matters because, it makes the party more democratic, small d democratic, less hostile to our movement, and more open to our ideas, right? We're seeing it, right? We've moved the party to the left on all kinds of different issues. So currently, the party's rigged and run by consultants and corporate Dems, but we can overtake it with mass numbers and if we do our organizing work. So let us know in the chat if you're already involved with your local or state party, or if you're willing to get involved. Would love to hear what's going on in your neck of the woods. And so, want to talk a little bit about the signups that we've been hearing about all night. We've had so far, almost 120 people sign up for all the different teams that we were mentioning. I'm going to give you guys one more opportunity to do so. Tonight we have, the Elect Progressives team. We heard from Megan Green what electing progressives at the local level can do almost immediately with the passage of the Basic Income Pilot Program in St. Louis. Power is going to be up for grabs in major cities here in 2023 and in some battleground states across the country. So you can join our Elect Progressive team to put progressives at the helm and make sure we start passing progressive policies, pushing on the outside, pushing on the inside to make it happen. That link is getting dropped in the chat right now. We also have the federal action team, right? We talked a little bit with Greg Casar, new member of Congress, who's super excited to be with us here in Washington, D.C., but also recognizes, right, that it's going to be a tough slog for anything to get through Congress with a majority of really insurrectionist Republicans at the helm at the House of Representatives. But we can still push our President Biden to do what he can with the power of the pen, right? Join our federal action team to help create the strategy and build pressure so we can push Biden to advance our policies in 2023 through executive action, right? Like healthcare bills for rail workers, lowering drug prescription prices, et cetera. Ending, drilling on federal lands. Those things are all really important to our members and to our planet. So, and then speaking of policies, right, we're not just fighting at the federal level, we're also fighting at the state level. And you heard from Saru and from Joseph about the history of the tip minimum wage and how we need to raise wages for workers. So if you want to help us fight for a living wage for millions and ending the tip minimum wage through legislation and ballot measures in key states across the country, please sign up to be part of the Raise the Wage team. That link is getting dropped in the chat right now. We can make a huge difference. We heard from Saru, all the different places, including Washington, D.C., where I'm at right now, raising the minimum wage to over $16 an hour, which is great. We can do that everywhere. but we got to organize to do it, right? So sign up for the team and let's make it happen, right? And then heading into 2023, we want to do that as strongly as possible. If you can become a member of our revolution, you'll get things like the Revolution Report. We'll send you some swag every now and then. You can help us carry out the work that we laid out tonight to make the biggest impact that we can in an off-year election at the state and local level and pushing President Biden to take action. So that link is getting dropped in the chat right now. Become a member. You can get one of these shirts. You can get stickers. You can get the newsletter that Amanda puts together. You heard from her earlier today. We'll give you plenty of opportunities to take action and move the ball forward on our progressive issues and help move America towards a more progressive future. And with that, I want to bring an end to this call tonight, the first one of 2023. Very exciting to have all of you here. We had over 500 people here in the Zoom room, probably thousands more watching on social media. So thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it. And like we did in 2016, like we did in last year, we're going to end our call like we do every other call. So when we organize,
we win.
When we organize,
we win.
When we organize,
we win.
All right. Good night, everybody. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Good night.
Good night.